All right, welcome to another edition of the Sports Guys. How you doing, Robbie?
I'm doing really well. We had a great week. Saw Iron Maiden and so much sports just exploding now that we're adding basketball, college basketball in to all this great football. It's a good
It's
time to
really
be
almost
watching
it's
sports.
almost sports overload right now. You've got, of course, NBA got kicked
Yeah.
off. We did our NBA NHL episode last week, and now we got college basketball. And there's a lot of great games going on. You're right. It's just
Hockey,
total sports overload right now.
boxing matches.
Yeah. Yep. So on our weekend update coming up, guys, to let you guys know on Monday, we will be talking about the boxing match, and we'll give you our take on it. So between Paul and Tyson, which happened last night. But tonight, in our episode 38, we're going to talk about college basketball. We're going to do a little preview of the season that's just gotten underway, some of the big teams to watch, some of the big players to watch, and we'll kind of go over at the very end who our predictions are and who we think are the best four teams to watch this year as we head towards March Madness and the Final Four. So any initial feelings about the season going forward, Robbie, and what you're excited about? I know that all of us UVA fans are still a little bit in mourning from Coach Bennett retiring and not wanting to be part of this whole new system with NIL and everything. But, Cavaliers are 3-0. We just beat a really good Villanova team. So who knows? Maybe they'll surprise us and they'll kind of rally around the flag a little bit.
So a couple of things. I would say to start off with, I think the March Madness is the greatest championship of all the sports. It's the most exciting, the most fraught with upsets, incredible excitement throughout the day while you're at work. You're catching up with Arkansas beat, so-and-so. There's so much excitement around March Madness. And the way they do it is spectacular. And then there's that little gap during the week so you can kind of regroup and then get ready for the next round. They hit home runs. March Madness is amazing. The second thing I would say is teams start out so different than they end within one season. Usually in football, you're kind of mostly what you started as, a little bit better or a little bit worse. But I've seen a lot of teams really become a completely different team by March and April. So it's really exciting to see these starting points for them, but it's hard to track the trajectory of how a team and a program are headed. A lot of times it's you end up kind of where you thought you would, but a lot of weird losses in December don't translate to a bad season.
That's right.
So it's kind of exciting in the beginning because you really are not sure how it's going to go, and you're trying to base everything. It's hard to track how players are going to develop. So you might have a senior center who's you're thinking is going to be the best player in the country, and then they end up kind of having a disappointing season. And then you have other guys who are sort of secondary afterthought players who are kind of around who end up working their way into an incredible season. So it's very exciting. I'm extremely excited about this time of year in basketball, in college basketball, because there's so much development that happens. I think it's less predictable than the pros, and that's what I like about it, actually.
There's a couple reasons for that. One, you're dealing with young people that have a lot more development to do. So you see in the NBA maybe a guy who can improve from year to year, but you're right. In college, you have these guys improve sometimes from month to month. You'll have a guy who doesn't look great in November who looks fantastic in February because of coaching, because of playing time, because he kind of figured some things out. You have all those elements, but then the other element that makes March Madness is the upsets. And the reason you have the upsets, of course, is because it's one and done format. In the NBA, you're playing 7-game series. So, if the LA Lakers or some other favorite team lose game one, it's far from over. Matter of fact, they'll still probably win. But in college basketball, if Kansas goes down in the first round against the number 16 seed, they don't get a do-over,
No,
So
they're out.
that's what makes it madness, and that's what people love about it, the unpredictability of it.
It's the greatest.
I mean, we've been to Vegas before, you and me together, out during March Madness time, and just walking around the streets of Vegas, looking at 64 teams' jerseys. Everyone who's there is represented. Everyone's excited. They all feel like they have a chance. And there's
For
just
sure.
there's nothing like it. I mean, college football is trying to replicate it now with a 12-team playoff, and I think they're getting closer.
They're doing a good job of trying to replicate what March Madness has been doing for decades.
That's right, but it still can't do it. And even the NFL, you know pretty much who's going to win the NFL for the most part. You have a really good feel for who's going to win.
The differences in football and basketball are just too large to overcome. You can't play a game 2 days apart. You can't get back on the horse after a loss and play 2 days later and look great again. It's football is a lot more. A bad loss sits with you for a week or longer, and you just have to stew in it. And you can definitely come back from a bad loss, but
I mean, we've talked all season about how much you and I love the new 12-team college football playoff and how great it is and how much it's going to expand the competition. We agree with all that. Yeah. That does not mean that Boise State's going to be an incredible story if they make the number 12 seed, but problem is they're going to be facing someone like Alabama or Georgia. It's just a complete different, sport. It's almost a different level of the sport. And so everyone's going to expect them to get blown out.
In football, I don't think you're going to see 12 seeds beating 1 seeds very often. But in basketball, it's very possible you'll get one a year,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and you get in that first round, you get four or five major upsets because, you get a 2 losing to a 15. That's still a pretty big upset, or a 3 losing to a 14. And it happens
or a 12 beating a 4,
Mm-hmm. That's right. That's right. So,
but a lot of times the 12 is coming from a good division, and they had some bad losses, so they snuck into the tournament, but they're a really good team. They might beat you. And a lot of these mid-major teams have really good shooters, and if they get hot, you're in trouble.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Do you think we're going to see the same effect in college basketball that we see in college football, which is the spreading out of talent across more teams, across more programs because of transfer portal, because of NIL? A guy doesn't want to sit as the number 12 on the depth chart anymore at a big program, maybe at Duke. Instead, he might go to Iowa State, or he might go to, Northwestern and want to be the star there and take an NIL.
I'd say yes and no. I think that basketball actually happened first. There was a lot more transferring, and there was a lot more of the reasoning that would go into it: playing time, possibly money, but not liking the way a coach is handling you, etc. But I think there was more transferring in basketball earlier on. That football's caught up to them a little bit, but I definitely think that both create a lot of upheaval, but they also do spread out the talent. And I think that has contributed over the last many years to mid-major teams knocking off 1 seeds and things like that for the first time in the last, 30, 40 years.
And it's diluted the big teams. So you've got, Kentucky's been struggling the last couple of years, and now they don't have Calipari. You've got Kansas didn't have a great year last year, although they're now preseason number 1. Duke has struggled to do anything in the tournament for 5 or 6 years. Carolina is good, but also hasn't fulfilled their promise. And a lot of it's just the watering down of the dominant teams, I think.
Mm-hmm. That's right. It's the flattening of the differential.
That's right. That's right. And you're right. The mid-major teams are a lot more powerful. In some ways, they're even more powerful in college basketball than college football. The mid-major.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. And it has been that way for a little while. So definitely a 15 beating a 2 is not unheard of in basketball. But if there were 15 teams in college football, there's no way that in a tournament setting, a 15 seed is going to beat a 2 seed very often. When it's all on the line, neutral site, neutral field, it's just not going to happen.
That's right. Absolutely
You can knock a Vanderbilt can beat a top ranked team on their home field and carry the goalposts out every now and then, but in a tournament setting on a neutral field, it's not really going to happen.
What happens is you get those really star young coaches coming up through the group of 5 ranks who haven't gotten the big job yet, but they're really excellent coaches, and they go to these mid-major programs and they coach them up and they get them in the tournament every year, and they knock off big programs and nobody wants to play them. And that's starting to happen in football now too. And what happens is, of course, the big programs go pluck those guys as the next kind of up and coming coach. So do you think coaching is more important in basketball or football at the college level?
I personally think basketball.
Why is that?
I think coaching it because there's a big series of assistant coaches in football that have a lot of times a bigger impact on the player than the head CEO of the team. In basketball, it's a lot of one-on-one time, a lot of tweaking. You're pulling your players to the bench more often for strategic reasons, X's and O's, dealing with the ups and downs. I remember so many seasons that ended up being pretty good seasons, and I'll use Virginia as an example, where they would start to lose a little bit, and the players had players-only meetings, and that got everybody to kind of rally, and then they would focus more on what the coach was getting them to do. And so leadership on the team plus coaching can really turn things around in basketball. Whereas I think football, there's so many moving parts that the head coach is really reliant on his offense coordinator, defense coordinator, and coordinators in general. So I would say personally, college basketball coaches and NFL head coaches are the most important coaches.
I'm not sure. I think that football is so much more complicated game. The X's and O's of it, the strategy of it, it really is truly like playing chess, whereas basketball is more like playing checkers. In basketball, you only have like 6 or 7 set plays at the most, whereas football, the playbook is so large that it takes guys months to learn it. So I don't know. I understand your argument. I feel a little bit the opposite, just because football is so complicated at the college and pro level that the coaching, whether it's the head coach all the way down to the coordinators, is so important. It's so unbelievably important. You can have the same quarterback look like trash with the wrong coaching staff, and he gets picked up like a Sam Darnold. It gets picked up at the college or pro level by the right coaching staff, and all of a sudden they.
But I think you're right. In the NFL, head coach in NFL is more important than head coach in college. And I've heard this from a lot of different sources that deal with college football and pro football. There's the biggest function that college coaches now have to do is recruiting their own players and recruiting new players.
And recruiting the portal.
That's where the champions really win. And then they have a lot to do with the X's and O's and setting tempo, but they're a lot less responsible for X's and O's than they would be in the NFL, for instance. The NFL, there's no recruiting at all.
Matter of fact, you've seen some college head coaches giving the jobs up and going to become assistants in the NFL.
Yeah.
Purely because they don't want to deal with the recruiting, they don't want to deal with the player issues, and they want to do X's and O's, and that's what they're good at.
Yep.
And so it's really been interesting to see these guys give up the $5 million salary and go take a $2 million salary as a coordinator because they want to do the X's and O's. They know what they're good at, they know what they like to do. So you're right. You're really a head recruiter, but I think you're more than that. I don't know. Drop us a comment.
You're a liaison to all the alumni groups, the university. There's a lot of pressures from the university. I work at NC State, so I know how much pressures come down on Dave Dorn to manage. People are unhappy with their offense coordinator and get him out of there and whatever. There's a lot he has to manage that has nothing to do with X's and O's and players. So, I think there's more distractions in college, to be honest.
And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that the coaching isn't really important at the college basketball level either. It is, because the head coach at both levels, pro and college in both sports, sets the tone, creates the culture, brings the tone for the entire program, hires the staff. Obviously, that's really important. So yeah, it's super important. I just think that football will always be a little bit more complex, and therefore the coaching is a little bit more important. That's just
complex for sure. I can just give you my opinion. I think college basketball coaching is so hard. I think pro football coaching is so hard. And then the other, college football and pro basketball, slightly less hard. There's more things to worry about. The health of your players, and there's so many different elements there. But I'm just telling you my personal opinion.
And the NBA game is so one-on-one based and so isolation based that there aren't as many plays in the NBA. So you're right. Definitely drop us a comment, guys, about what you think is the hardest coaching gig. Is it college football? Is it pro football? Is it college basketball or pro basketball? Tell us what you guys think. Maybe we're not thinking of something. So
there's definitely a debate here that's valuable and interesting. I would not say that there's a wrong answer. I'd love to hear other people's personal opinion because we're just giving ours. But I do think that college basketball coaching, now that you've got transfer portal like it is, no one pays a price. You can go straight in, get $1 million, start playing right away, and make an impact on a team where you're one of 5 instead of 53-man rosters and all that stuff. A little bigger in college, but I just think managing all that made Tony Bennett retire and made Jim Boeheim tired and made, so many of the old time coaches, Jay Wright and Krzyzewski, they were just kind of done. It's just really, really hard.
And what had happened was with Coach K, with Jay Wright, with Tony Bennett, with all these guys, Roy Williams, they like to teach kids. When it came to coaching, all of those decades, these guys just wanted to teach kids. They wanted to be a teacher. And when it went from that to managing recruitment, managing portals, managing NIL deals, and all of the things that they didn't like, when that became all consuming, they got out. It's really simple.
I'll tell you, the one piece of it that I think drives all these old school coaches out is recruiting your own players. I think they said, look, we already recruited you. You're going through a bad stretch in your career right now because you're not shooting well. You need to be on the bench. And then they're like, yeah, but Alabama called. They want to recruit me away. I'm going to go for the big payday and all that. So they're not facing the adversity and getting through it. And so the old school coaches liked to develop their players by having some adversity, putting them on the bench, seeing them sort of go through struggles and helping them get to where they wanted them to through hard work and dedication and perspiration, working in the gym, especially in the off season. The off-season leap that some of these players make, the only reason you feel that is because you have a driving anger about what happened to you last season. Tony Bennett used to say, losing is, you have to learn how to lose first before you learn how to win. I really believe that. I think that some of the struggles that need to happen aren't happening because people are just, okay, bye, I'm out of here. It's just like easy breakups in relationships or something. It doesn't really teach you to hang in there and build something.
He talked a lot about using adversity. You can get further. You can get further on the positive side by using the adversity that comes your way.
It's too easy.
He and his players often embraced the adversity. They didn't like it, but they embraced it because
they hated it, but it drove them in the gym to work harder. And I just heard a South Carolina player in football talking about the same thing, the same concept, about how they were really unhappy with how last year ended at South Carolina. And they really wanted to, it's been driving them all year, all off season. And now they're on a roll with 3 big wins in a row. And they feel like they're breaking through at the right time. And they're a dangerous team. South Carolina, they may not be going to the playoff or anything, but they are a world, they're a spoiler. So I think the concept is interesting.
So in a world of college basketball where all the legendary coaches are retiring or have retired, The talent is spread out to more teams. You have more teams that have a chance. We're about to look at the top 25 list, and really, you look at any of those top 25 could make a big run at the right time if they get hot, right? The NIL, the portal, guys staying 1 year and going to another program. Do you think the state of college basketball is in a good place, a bad place, transitioning? Where do you think it is right now?
I think it's headed towards a really good place. I think it's transitioning and not in a great place at the moment, and hasn't been for about 3 years. But I thought last year's final was excellent. I thought the March Madness was excellent last year. I believe that it's headed toward a good place because when you have parity, you involve more of the country and get more excitement around it, more eyeballs, more dollars, bigger drive for athletes to go into basketball instead of baseball, or go into basketball instead of soccer, or whatever. I think ultimately it's going to be a good thing. A lot of these coaches who retired have simply come out and stated there need to be some limits on the freedoms that these players have. There have to be some. Maybe you allowed to transfer once, but then after one, you have to sit or something. There have to be some common sense things that they try. Some will miss, some will hit, but the current state, I think, needs adjustments. But are we pointed in a good direction? I would say yes. I think that.
But we're in the throes of changes. We're in the throes of transitioning where it's going to take us a couple of years for this to settle out. That's basically where we are.
Correct. Players are going to stay longer in college because there's money to be made in college, which is going to help the level of college basketball. One and dones was terrible for college basketball because it was exciting to watch a kid like Zion come in and he was out of there. There was no attachment watching a development happening over a course of 4 years. That wasn't good for college basketball. One and done was not good for college basketball. Is it going to continue to happen? Yes. Is Cooper Flagg going to be there for 4 years? Probably not. But it would be amazing if they could make a system that a lot of those kids stayed. Not all of them, but a lot of them stayed, so that you would have something to work towards. As you became more of a senior, your team was improving and you have a shot at the thing. And more teams have a shot if you don't have just the blue blood programs walloping mid-major and other lower teams. Instead, this exciting tournament where more and more teams have good players, I think it's going to be good. Check back in about 5 years.
Yeah, I agree with that. And the competition continues to get better every year. The tournament continues to get better every year. I mean, the tournament is still fantastic. And, the number of teams that have a chance continues to grow. And so I think most of the directional things are positive, but I do think that NIL and transfer portal, there's got to be some rules put in place. Right now, it's just Wild West.
Right. And I think there's going to be fewer and fewer one and done. That's my personal opinion. I think people want to stay, make money, try and take a shot at the national title, maybe transfer, do something like that. And I think that'll help college basketball.
Yeah, I think your point is a really good one about one and dones versus guys who stay. You got like RJ Davis in previous years. I think he would have left 1 or 2 years ago. Now he's a fifth-year senior.
I won't be shocked if Cooper Flagg wants to. I won't be shocked if Cooper Flagg has something happen throughout the season, either a really good season or something disappointing where he's like, I'm going to come back. I'm making good money at Duke. I want to do something.
But you don't see Cooper Flagg staying for 5 years like RJ Davis did.
No. But it would be nice if he came back for 2 or 3.
Yeah. So I think
he might be the exception going forward.
I agree.
Somebody like him might be one and done forever, and that's fine.
I agree. And you have this kid at Rutgers, this freshman at Rutgers, they think might be a one and done. You've got him. You've got a couple of others. I think you're going to get maybe 3 or 4 a year. It's going to be a really small number of folks that are so good they probably could go straight from high school to the NBA. Yeah. And then otherwise, the LeBron James of the world. But otherwise, most players will stay 4 or 5 years because they're getting paid, right?
We could have a system that we're starting now, though, that to be a big fish in a college pond, making several million a year and enjoying the college experience and making promises to your grandma that you're going to graduate and all these other things might be enough, instead of going and sitting as the 11th man on the Utah Jazz and not being sure you can break through into that starting lineup and really making the big money. Because a max contract is insane. You can't turn that down. But how many guys get a max contract? If you're getting, a much smaller amount and it's comparable to the college, you probably would stay in college.
But if Cooper Flagg, after this year, they're telling him he's going to be a top 1 or 2 pick, I'm not sure.
Yeah, you have to go.
I think you got to go.
You have to go.
Yeah, and he's probably not really going to be ready, but it is what it is.
Right. But that's the thing. You can stay in college and make sure you're ready and have a couple bites at the apple trying to get a national championship, which makes you a legend at your school forever.
Yes, he's 17 years old.
And still have NBA career
after
that.
17 years old, and he has not bulked up yet. He needs to get in the gym. Mm-hmm. I'd say stay at least 2 years at Duke. It's a really good program. And then after your second year, come out and be the number 1, number 2 pick. That's what I would do.
I agree. I think it is very foreseeable that unless he bulks up, he's going to be a huge high pick and then end up fighting for a place on the starting on the team and maybe get bounced down to the G League sometimes. I don't think that's a very pleasant experience compared to being in college, being a big man on campus. I'm not sure Bronny shouldn't have stayed in college. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
He might have enjoyed it more.
Well, there's only one reason he didn't, because his dad wanted to play with him in the NBA. It's the only reason he can't.
Right. But somebody like him, who's going to be bouncing to the G League probably his whole career, he could have stayed in college and tried to build up his credentials a little bit.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Let's go take a look at the material.
Let's do it.
All right, this is our episode 38, NCAA College Basketball, our 2024-25 season preview. Can you believe we're already at 2025, Robbie?
No.
Pretty incredible. You see 2 of the players we were talking about there up on the top left. Those are 4 of the best players in college basketball. But you have R.J. Davis on the left there, the 5th-year senior from North Carolina. And, of course, Cooper Flagg, the 17-year-old phenom for Duke that everyone's talking about and everyone wants to see play this year. The Final Four this year is going to be in San Antonio at the Alamo Dome, which is a really great venue. It's actually built for football or basketball. I shamelessly put a plug in for Tony Bennett there on the bottom left with his boys when he won the national championship in 2019. What an amazing run that was. And that's really kind of what college basketball and what college athletics in general is all about. What happened to Virginia that year. As a matter of fact, they still show the documentary that they put together about that season on HBO regularly. I was watching HBO a little bit last night, and the Virginia run to the Final Four and to winning that championship is still on there. So pretty fun. But and then I got the 4 major conferences on the right there: ACC, SEC, Big 12, and Big 10. Those are the big impact conferences for both basketball and football. So any quick comments about this college basketball landscape?
I think it's a very exciting time because, like I said, we're at the beginning of the development phase. And so many of these teams' personalities are really going to be shaping out. When you play a Tuesday away game in the middle of the early part of the season, you're right for getting upset. It doesn't mean that's who you're going to be in March. And so those kind of little losses along the way help contribute to making your team more ready for the tournament. So it's hard to say who's going to experience the fewest injuries and the best development cycle. But this is a very exciting time because that a lot of these teams' personalities are going to be forged now through some of the adversity they're going to go through.
And you mentioned all these players that have been highly recruited over the last couple of years. For Virginia, we've got one in Isaac McNeely, and he's been a good shooter, but he's never really had his full breakout season. Well, this year he's playing just extraordinarily well. He's looking almost like an All-American type candidate. Goes 8 for 9 the other night against Villanova. And so, we're going to watch a lot of these players on these top teams emerge. Maybe people have never heard of them. They're kind of only known by their coaching staff at this point. They're going to emerge this season. It's going to be really exciting to see which guys come out of the nowhere land into prominence in all of our national attention. So I'm looking forward to that. So looking back at last year, the 2023-24 Final Four March Madness bracket, our NC State Wolfpack got all the way to the Final Four. What was amazing was they were the number 11 seed in the ACC. Were not going to make the tournament, and the only way they could make the tournament is if they won the ACC championship by winning the ACC tournament, and they did so. They went on this magical run that nobody saw coming, and end up going from 11 seed in the ACC to 11 seed in the tournament. Everyone writing them off, and maybe they could win one game in the first round. Go on this huge run and end up facing Purdue in the Final Four. And really, it was just so much fun to go on the ride with these guys. Mm-hmm. And then on the other bracket, you had Alabama, who was good all year, of course, with Brandon Miller. Mm-hmm. And UConn was fantastic all year, and they were the defending champs and the number 1 seed the entire season. Purdue being the number 2 seed the entire season. And those two teams, it was kind of what everyone wanted to see, and they faced each other. You had the two big centers. We had this episode. If anybody has not watched it yet, you should watch our episode from the spring where we broke down the Final Four, and we talked about the center position being back in college basketball. And it was really exciting with Zach Edey. And, of course, UConn comes out on top fairly convincingly. I picked them. You picked Purdue. Both could have won, but UConn comes out the back-to-back champs. Any thoughts about wrapping up that Final Four?
It was really exciting. That was one of my favorites I've watched. To be on campus at NC State and to watch the excitement hit that campus, it was unbelievable. The only thing comparable I can even relate to it was when Virginia got up to number 1 in the country for a few weeks back in 1990 in football, where the campus was just electric. That's the only thing I've ever seen that was similar. So that run was magical to see those kids at local Waffle Houses where they were signing autographs, and it was just a big deal. And so I know that all these campuses went through something similar with their star kids, and it was very exciting. The actual tournament, the Final Four, was amazing. Obviously, Zach Edey was somebody that impressed me to a point where I thought he was going to be able to get it all done. Alabama was super they were fantastic all year. They belonged there. And honestly, UConn's program is just a steamrolling machine right now. I don't know that you can root against them. They're kind of the Kansas City Chiefs of college basketball.
What do you think of Bobby Hurley's brother, Dan Hurley, the program he's built? He's got 2 rings now. He's hoisted the trophy 2 years in a row. Even before that, when he didn't get his first ring yet, he had taken them on very deep runs. He just seems to have solidified and put UConn back on the map. Not that they had really been gone anywhere, but the program he's built is just a juggernaut at this point.
He's such a good college coach. I mean, he's such a good recruiter. He keeps his kids focused through the whole season. He has them playing their best basketball going into March. He's got matchups. He's always developing every part of his team so that when you run into a Zach Edey, you have enough interior play where you can handle it. Other teams couldn't. Other teams were just had no ability to stop Zach Edey or a lot of the scoring from Alabama or other teams that just would.
You know what I noticed was he was running 10 and 12 deep rotations, and a lot of teams at that stage of the season don't do that. They do that early in the season. They run 12 guys, but you get to the tournament, they're running 8 guys typically.
Yeah, and they're grinding their guys into the ground and making them so exhausted.
He was still running 12-team rotations in the Final Four, and he was running 3 different centers at Edey and just completely wearing them out.
I know. When you're tired, you're more likely to get upset by a lesser team. That's my opinion. Therefore, I've always been really nervous about rooting for a team like Virginia that's so defense focused. the amount of energy it takes to play defense where you're slapping the floor all season long, plus trying to score on really good ACC defenses all year long. By the time you hit the tournament, you're kind of out of gas. And that's why it's just so hard. And the only way to do it is to have a big enough rotation to where everybody's semi-fresh.
And how do
if
you
you
do
don't
that?
have a 10-man rotation, I don't think you can get it done.
And how do you do that? You do that through recruiting. He's got all this
Right.
depth. He's got 3 great centers. He's got 3 great point guards. He's got 3 great shooting guards. He's got all this depth, and it
You
really
recruit
shows.
depth and you build depth. If you don't trust the guy that you recruited until next year when he's a senior, if you don't play him now while he's a junior in these important spots, he's never going to be ready until the end. So you've got to trust your guys, recruit them, develop them, get them ready through big, early season tournaments are a good measuring stick. Where are we here in December and all that, and playing out in Hawaii in these tournaments. And that's good experience where you can see the adversity. You're down by 3 with 8 seconds left. What are you made of?
That's right.
That's what the March Madness is all about.
This entire tournament was so exciting from beginning to end. I loved every minute of it, and this Final Four was great. I would love to take you back to Vegas again for your birthday and go see the NCAA Madness in Vegas. There's just
only if you twist my arm.
Okay. Well, if you agree,
let's go see the Scorpions again. They're playing their 60th anniversary show. You guys should all. I recommend it to everyone out there. Go see them.
I got to do it. Just like he mentioned Iron Maiden this week. We went to see Iron Maiden with Henry and Henry's Rock Review, and just had an absolute blast. So let's look at the preseason AP Top 25. A lot of big names on here. Some interesting names. You got Kansas. Had a really disappointing year last year, but they're the preseason number 1. They're really loaded. Hunter Dickinson, of course, one of the best centers in the country, and lined up to be a lottery pick next year in the NBA. You have Alabama, that's always good, has brought back almost all of their Final Four team from last year. The Huskies, of course, you can never discount Dan and his team, and they're trying to do a three-peat, which, you can say it's impossible, but I don't know. I'll never bet against that team again. Houston, really, really good program. Obviously, they won their conference last year. Iowa State's really, really solid this year. Gonzaga's always there. Duke with Cooper Flagg, the number 1 recruit in the country. Baylor at 8. North Carolina at 9 with R.J. Davis, the number 2 player in the country. And Arizona at 10. And then you see some other guys down below. You got Tennessee's really good. Purdue has dropped quite a bit without Edey. You have some other teams I would just say of note. Marquette is always really solid in the tournament. UCLA has now joined the Big Ten. Kentucky, which I found really surprising, is all the way down at 23. I thought they'd be a little higher, although they're discounting them because the loss of Calipari as their coach. And then the sleeper team everyone's talking about is Rutgers. They have 2 of the biggest recruits in the country who've come in this year, and they think they're going to make some noise in the Big Ten. So any thoughts about this AP Top 25? Anybody surprise you?
Not really. It looks like an incredible year in college basketball to me, whether it's exciting freshmen coming in or veterans who've really developed and built themselves up. These programs, there's going to be a lot of movement in this top 25 over the next 2 months. People are going to be losing, falling out, new ones coming in. It's just so exciting. And then it all sets up March Madness.
And I didn't mention Creighton at 15. Creighton's at 15. But you'll notice, like, if you look at just the top 15, these guys are not only the blue bloods, but on top of that, these are the teams that have the real success in March. And when I say in March, I mean in their conference tournaments and in the big dance. And you got Gonzaga. You can never discount them. They're always there. They always make deep runs. You see Houston has had a lot of success the last couple tournaments. Iowa State has been really making noise in their division the last 2 years. Of course, Creighton is always one of those teams you don't want to play in March Madness. So, it's very exciting, and there's a lot of teams you're going to have to get through if you're going to make a run this year. Of course, we don't see the Virginia Cavaliers in the top 25. I'm not sure they would have been there with Tony Bennett, but
No.
certainly without Tony Bennett, I think this is kind of a prove-it year for the Cavaliers, sitting at 3-0 right now. But we'll see when they get into the ACC schedule.
I think their goal needs to be try to get into the top 4 of the ACC.
Maybe
top 5, and that would be a
Well,
successful season.
I also don't see Wake here, and Wake is considered the number 3 team in the ACC right now. They may very easily slip up into this top 25. You might see a couple more ACC teams come up in here as they have good seasons. Miami, of course, has a pretty good team. So pretty exciting. At the end of the program tonight, guys, we're going to look at this AP 25 poll again, and Rob and I are going to choose our way too early Final Four. So it'll be fun. Let's look at the ACC. Their predicted order of finish this year in 2024-25 is on the left there: Duke, North Carolina, Wake, Clemson, Virginia, Miami. So those are your top 6. And then on the right, you see how they actually finished last year. North Carolina won the division at 17-3. Duke came in second. Virginia came in third. Any thoughts about the prediction this year for 2024-25 in the ACC?
Well, I would say always watch out for Florida State. I know they're projected to be not very good this year, but they always seem to have a bunch of 7-footers, a bunch of athletes, and they're relevant. And so I always think they should be in the top 7 or 8. So I wouldn't be surprised if they kind of work their way up there. They're not going to do much, but I think they're going to have some nice wins and surprise.
I'd say Miami. Look out for Miami. Look out for Miami Hurricanes.
Yeah, same.
I think they could really surprise some people this year.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then what about NC State? I mean, I know they're at 8. They lost some players. They had the magical run last year. Of course, you saw that they were sitting 9-11 at the end of the season. Then they made that major run to the Final Four. They've got the coaching and the athletes to do it.
I like Keats as a coach. I think he's really good. I think what they do with their program is very special. A long time ago, Virginia played UNC Wilmington with Keats as the coach. And Bennett said it was the first time he's ever seen a 5-guard lineup. And he said that he had to go small just to keep up with them. I think if NC State starts to move toward pressuring a lot on defense and having a big 10, 11-man rotation, they're going to be a real dangerous team.
That's true.
But if they shrink the rotation down to a smaller and smaller group and they don't play pressure defense, I think they're really vulnerable. So a lot depends on not just Keats as a coach, but can he get them to the point where they can do that kind of pressure defense?
That's right.
Or are they going to get burned by good point guards?
Another team here, Pittsburgh came in 4th last year at 12-8, and they're sitting at 7 on this chart. But I'd watch out for Pittsburgh. They've got Capel. He knows how to knock off a lot of the big boys. They always have a competent program. So they're another team I'd watch out for.
I think Capel is as good a coach as any in the ACC now.
Agreed. And I mean, Clemson's coaching is really good too. So I think there's a lot of good teams here. I really believe that the ACC has been shorted the number of entrants into the tournament the last couple of years. They usually get 4 or 5 in, and they really should get 6 or 7. And they've been shorted. I'm not sure why the disrespect is there. It didn't used to be there. We used to get 6 or 7 into the tournament, but more and more they've been cutting us off and putting in mid-majors. So I'm real curious to see how many of these guys get in this year. Let's take a look at the Big Ten.
When I think of one and dones, I think of 3 programs: Kentucky, Duke, and Carolina. And so I think that hurt ACC basketball over the last 5 years. I think getting rid of one and done probably is going to help the ACC over the next couple of years.
I would agree. Let's look at the Big Ten. We got on the left there Purdue, Indiana, UCLA, the new Big Ten entrant, Illinois, who came in second last year, Michigan State, Oregon, and Rutgers. Rutgers with those two real surprising players that are coming in. Kind of an interesting mix here in the Big Ten. A lot of the players that you're used to, Ohio State, Michigan, Iowa, Wisconsin, a lot of those teams that usually dominate in the Big Ten are kind of further down this year.
Yeah, Wisconsin. Mm-hmm.
It's a really interesting mix that they're predicting here for the Big Ten. On the right, you see how it ended up last year. Of course, Purdue won with a 17-3 record, and then Illinois came in a close second. Nebraska actually had a really nice season as well.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts about this scrambled Big Ten? It's really looks different than it used to be.
It's difficult to say. I think that they lost a lot of players to the NBA, and it's difficult to say. I think that they could end up with a nice group at the top that really makes a hard push in March, but this doesn't strike me as the top of the top right now.
Some people would argue, though, that bringing in UCLA and bringing in Oregon and bringing in USC and all these new teams has actually made the Big Ten stronger and deeper in basketball.
Maybe.
And so we'll see. But you've got Purdue, Indiana, UCLA, Illinois. At least those four teams, all of them can make noise in the tournament. There's just no question about it. And then that leaves the second tier. Some of those other teams, Michigan State, of course, has great coaching. Rutgers is the surprise team. A lot of people are watching this year, and then Ohio State and Michigan you can never discount. So I don't know. They may get 6 or 7 teams into the tournament if they have a real strong season. We'll be watching closely. I am curious if Purdue can repeat as champion again of the Big Ten without Edey. I'm real curious about that, or if they're going to fall down a little bit.
I won't be surprised if they stumble a little bit. Mm-hmm. When you lose a generational player like that, it's really hard to stay up at that level.
How can they be so good in basketball and so bad in football? That's about what I know.
I don't know.
Really, it's crazy how bad.
There's a lot of teams like that, actually. You're good at one or the other.
Yeah.
Indiana is no longer one of them. They're good in both.
They used to be a basketball school.
Yeah. Forever, too.
Yeah. So interesting. SEC on the left there, you got Alabama. They're thinking it's going to repeat again, followed by Auburn. Tennessee, of course, is a really great team. They've been making noise in the tournament for a couple of years now. Arkansas, really strong. Texas A&M has been coming on in basketball. Florida is usually always there, and so is Texas. And then Kentucky, surprisingly, sitting at 8 in the SEC, which I found that real curious. And I'm not sure that's really going to happen this year. We'll see in the final standings. But you see on the right there how they finished last year: Alabama, Texas A&M, and then Kentucky. Any thoughts about this very deep SEC group?
I think this is a better group than the Big Ten. Me personally.
I agree with that. I mean, they got
more
teams
dangerous.
You got Ole Miss, you got South Carolina, Georgia at 12. And Georgia's a pretty good team.
You might have Texas fall off the map, but Kentucky might shoot upward. You might have Ole Miss have a surprisingly good season. Tennessee be as strong as we've seen them in past tournaments. Auburn, there's a lot of teams here that could make a run.
Mm-hmm.
I know that's true of the Big Ten too, but to me it seems more likely that these are going to be.
I think Alabama and Tennessee are the class of that division, if you're going to choose two teams. Alabama and Tennessee are the two most likely to make a huge run. Maybe A&M and Kentucky to be the other two. So we'll see. It's going to be an exciting year in the SEC, I think, for basketball. So final conference we're going to look at is the Big 12, with Kansas getting 6 first-place votes. And, of course, they're the number 1 team in the preseason poll. Houston getting 2 first-place votes, so they're real close. And everyone's considering both of them as kind of Final Four contenders, Kansas and Houston. And you can see Houston actually won the division last year. Iowa State came in second, so they're thinking they'll be the 3rd best team. Baylor's a really great basketball program. They were in the Final Four a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
Arizona's always been great. You can never discount them. Cincinnati's one of those teams that can make a run. Texas Tech's got really good coaching and solid program. And K-State. BYU has some really great players this year. So this looks like a pretty deep Big 12 in basketball this year. What do you think?
Yeah, the top 8 teams really have a shot at making some noise.
I agree with that. Yeah. The Kansas-Houston duo might be the best duo of any of the conferences, I think, right now. Those two solid teams are, like most of the pundits are saying, really are Final Four contenders.
Uh-huh.
We'll have to watch. It'll be really fun to see how they do. So some of the players to watch, you got Ziegler from Tennessee. He's a senior. And essentially, Tennessee lost a lot of scoring from last year. They're going to really be leaning on this guy. He had an 11.8 point average last year, but they really need him to increase that. He's one of their best three-point shooters. He's their big shot maker when they need a clutch shot. And so he, is one of those guys that they're going to be really leaning on if they're going to go where they want to go this year. He's a senior, so he's going to be the last kind of wave from the last big team that Rick Barnes has had in that program. You got Ballo from Indiana Hoosiers. He had a really good season last year, really kind of had a breakout year. Has been one of the biggest big men and is projected to go pretty high in the NBA draft, potentially even a lottery pick. It'll be really interesting to see how he does this year. He had a real nice 12.9 points and 10 rebound season last year. Could even be potentially kind of a first or second team All-American type candidate for Indiana. You got Braden Smith, who's taking over the leadership role for the Purdue Boilermakers. Now that Edey has left, he's a junior this year. He's a guard, really outstanding leader, great player. You can see there for points per game, his assist ratios. He shoots 43% from three-point line, which is really high percentage. He has actually been named the Big Ten's preseason player of the year. So he's got that kind of respect in the conference. So we'll see. You remember watching him last year, how exciting Braden Smith was. In a lot of ways, Edey was the most imposing player, but Braden Smith was the engine that made that team go.
He was the heartbeat, yeah.
Yeah. You got Cryer for the Houston Cougars, is also a senior. He had a fantastic year last year. Maybe the most prolific three-point shooter in the country the last 3 seasons. And I know NBA teams are really licking their chops to go get this guy. So it'll be real fun to watch. He's hitting his three-pointers at a 41% clip for his career, which is pretty amazing to be over 40%. And Sampson is a really good coach, and he's got that program in a really good place. So all 4 of these guys, really exciting players to watch. Any comments on any of them before we go to the next page?
I don't know. I think Cryer, Houston's a real good defensive team. And they're also draining threes, and I don't know, the talent level seems, a lot of people came back this year, which is nice.
That's right.
So it's going to be fun to watch these guys take a step up physically and also mentally as leaders. Braden Smith's going to take on a bigger leadership role than he already had. And
I'm excited about both those guys. I'm excited about this guy, Ballo. I think that to watch we talked about the center position back in college basketball.
Yeah.
This guy's carrying that on, and he's a senior, and they're looking at him as being maybe the best big man in the Big Ten this year. To really watch him round into shape and get himself ready for the draft. It's going to be really fun to watch how dominating he is. So we'll see. Coming to the next guy, we've got this kid, Edgecombe, who's a 6'4" two-way star, and he's projected lottery pick for the 2025 NBA draft. I think he's going to be a one-and-done guy for the Baylor Bears. He's a 5-star prospect and justified his hype when he's excelled in the Summer League. He actually played in the World Summer League and apparently just absolutely balled out. He's from Bahamas, which is really interesting. And he actually did not go to the Paris Olympics, and a lot of people found that really surprising, but they think he maybe was advised not to go to get himself ready for his one season in college basketball. You can see what he did in terms of the qualifying tournament in Valencia. Just absolutely dominated. for the Bohemian team.
Mm-hmm.
So really exciting freshman to watch there, Edgecombe. You got Richmond, who's the St. John senior who drives that team. Probably the best transfer in the portal this past spring. Rick Pitino and the Red Storm were able to land him, although there was about 10 coaches that made an offer to Richmond to come be their point guard for one season. He's a one-and-done situation because he is in his last year of eligibility. Apparently, he was the MVP of the NIT tournament last year in the title game. So a real exciting player there for Rick Pitino and the Red Storm. We got Lipsy for Iowa State. This is Luke's team, junior guard. And he was the key to Cyclone's trip to the Sweet 16 last year. He really drove that team and got them a pretty good distance in the tournament. Has a real nice average scoring, rebounds, and assists per game. He returned to become a reliable threat from beyond the arc. His three-point shooting was a little bit off last year. And so he wants to be able to show before he goes to the NBA draft that he can shoot like he did the year before, which was 39%. So we'll see if Lipsy has that kind of comeback here at the three-point line. Then we have Salas, who's the big player for Wake Forest. He was a real stud last year. He was second-team All-American and very highly touted prospect in high school, and now has rounded out into one of the best players in the ACC. Is going to be driving Wake Forest this year. Any overall thoughts about any of these four?
Just there's going to be a lot of exciting guard play in college level this year, it looks like.
Yeah. That's what makes the tournament so great, right? When you have the 15 beating the twos, you have these guards step up that nobody's ever heard of and come out of nowhere and have a big 30-point game or something. So it's getting me pumped up to watch this year, to watch all these great players.
Yeah.
So then Rutgers has two really great players in the top 20 players to watch. This guy, Dylan Harper, is a freshman guard. And Ron Harper, who's his father, finished with a 22.9 points per game average his rookie year with the Cleveland Cavaliers. Well, his son is a 6'5" projected lottery pick in the NBA. They're thinking that he may be a one-and-done at the Rutgers Scarlet Knights. He had a 22-point effort in the McDonald's All-American game in April, and that really put him on the map. A lot of people were really surprised he picked Rutgers because he had been offered by about 25 major programs, including North Carolina, including Michigan, Indiana, and he went to Rutgers. So that was kind of a head-scratcher. But going to be exciting to watch. We got Cam Jones with Marquette. Marquette always a really solid team, and he was the guy who drove them to a really nice run last year, playing alongside Tyler Kolek. And so he is an All-American point guard, and he averaged 20.8 points and 4.5 assists. So this is guy obviously going to be playing in the NBA one day. He'll have his hands on the ball even more this year with Tyler Kolek having moved to the next level. So he's their true playmaker. So it's going to be fun to watch Cam Jones as he rounds into shape. Alex Karabon with UConn is another guy who's left over from the national championship team. You might remember him. Nobody really had ever heard of him until he got into the Final Four, and he had a really solid Final Four. It was one of the real reasons that they were able to get over the hump. He did decide to return and not go to the NBA. He was projected as a low first-round pick and was probably advised, why don't you stay one more year and see if you can get up in that top 13 lottery pick territory. So he's going to be one of their real great players this year, Karabon. And then the other Rutgers guy is Ace Bailey. He's a freshman guard as well. Bailey was not far behind Cooper Flagg in terms of his NBA draft stock coming out of high school. And again, head scratcher as to why in the world he chose Rutgers. Both of these guys were head scratchers, but going to be really fun to watch that team this year as they have these two essentially All-American level guards coming in at both 18 years old. It's going to be fun to watch that team. And then you've got Kyle Cabrenner, who's the Creighton Blue Jays center senior. And he was a really great player last year and really fun to watch. And this year he's going to be even more prominent as one of the big men in college basketball to watch. He's 7'1" and averaged 17 points a game, 7 rebounds a game. And he's probably the nation's best center this year in terms of all-around game. Anything on these 5 guys?
It's interesting that they did such a good job at Rutgers recruiting these freshman guards.
Isn't that wild that they didn't go to the big
Yeah.
program?
I'm interested to see if Caravan can lead the Huskies. He's off to a good start. He is averaging 18 points a game so far, and he's got a nice supporting cast, an incredible coach. So I think junior year, he's still got one more year if he wants. It'd be exciting to see UConn this year.
And you notice that Creighton's always a blue blood, Marquette's always a blue blood, UConn, and then you have this team out of nowhere, the Rutgers Scarlet Knights. You get these 2 McDonald's All-American level players.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I'm going to be looking out of the side of my eye this year at Rutgers and how they do. They might surprise some people.
Yeah.
Be fun to watch. So 7 is Wade Taylor. He's with Texas A&M. Really great player last year. He put A&M on the map. They made a really nice run. Actually, with back-to-back wins against Kentucky and Florida, knocking both of them out of the SEC tournament. And he had a 41-point outing against Arkansas in January. So he really has put himself on the map as a senior guard. And he'll be looking for another All-ACC selection this year like he got last year. So Wade Taylor's definitely on NBA radars right now for Texas A&M. You got Caleb Love, who used to be at UNC, transferred. This is his second season in Arizona. Last year, he made 54% of his shots in transition, which is really high percentage. He had a slow start from three-pointers, but he eventually had an average of 37% from behind the arc, which puts him in NBA territory, averaging 18 points a game for the Wildcats, and has been on NBA radar really his entire career, and thinks he can round out his game this year as a senior and finally get drafted where he thinks he should be. So that's Caleb Love with his ending of his career, having started at Chapel Hill. You got Broom, who's the Auburn Tigers senior forward, who's a really great player. He really made some noise last year. Been a dominant force on both ends of the court. He also started his career at Morehead State, but then transferred to Auburn. He attempted 36 three-pointers in his first 3 college seasons, and then he took 70 last season in one season, hitting 35%. So somebody got to him in the gym and told him, hey, look, the only way you're going to make it in the NBA is you got to be able to shoot threes. So that's interesting to watch this guy develop. Hunter Dickinson, who's made several stops in his career, including Michigan initially, and then now with the Kansas Jayhawks. He's the 7-footer who's obviously one of the more dominant centers in basketball, and is, some people think, AP All-American team and maybe even possible College Player of the Year. We'll have to see what kind of season he has. He's added the three-point shot to his game this past season. Before that, he was not shooting them. And so all of a sudden, you've got these centers shooting threes like we talked about. It's kind of a different game. And then you've got Mark Sears with the Crimson Tide, the senior guard. This guy made a name when he was the running mate for Brandon Miller for a couple of years, and now he's the senior leader of that team, the team that they think is going to win the SEC. Having gotten a bunch of 30-point games in the past couple of years, he's really emerged as an offensive threat. Thoughts about these 5?
Well, all senior leadership as you go up the ranks, I think that's not an accident. I'm really excited to see how Caleb Love does in a different program. I'm pulling for him a little bit. Johnny Broom is averaging a lot of rebounds as well. So he's an offensive threat, and he's also defensive and rebounding. So he's really a nice, setting himself up nicely to make a run for the NBA.
He's one of those forwards who plays like a center on defense.
Yeah.
And yet can hit threes because he's a forward. He's kind of a combo player.
And Hunter Dickinson is 7'2", huge size. He's from Alexandria, Virginia. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
Alexandria, Virginia. So averaging right now 21.3 points per game. He is so ready for the NBA. He just needs to keep working on some things, and he's added 3-point shot. He's been a traditional center most of his career. He's a real mismatch problem for defenses. And if he can start hitting threes, he's definitely going to be a nice high pick for NBA. And then Mark Sears, again, is he's really having a nice season so far, 18 points a game. And he's pretty good at assists. So he's a nice guard on a team that really has both offense and defensive capabilities.
You know what they love about Sears? Not only is he incredibly productive at both ends of the floor, but his leadership is just unquestioned. Like the whole team follows him. He's a leader from beginning to end. That's what you want in your point guard. So, it's going to be.
Who knew that Alabama's a basketball school now?
They are. They're producing a lot of great players. Yeah. I think all these guys are going to be fun to watch this year.
Yeah.
I'm excited about it.
Yeah. It's a nice big group of talent,
Let's talk about the top two guys. R.J. Davis with North Carolina. You just seen him coming on every year. Finally gets to his 5th year. Coming out of COVID, he took an extra year of eligibility just to make sure he got into the lottery, which he's going to do. It's going to definitely be a lottery pick. I don't know if it'll be 1, 2, 3, somewhere in that range from North Carolina. And then, of course, Cooper Flagg, the highest recruited guy in about 3 years, goes to Duke. He had about 40 different offers from teams. He's most definitely going to be a one and done unless he decides to come back for one more year, which you and I advised, but likely going to be a one and done and be a lottery pick. And it's just the kind of talent you haven't seen in a long time. When I was watching some of his clips last night, it's just mind boggling some of the things this guy can do at 6'7". So it's going to be fun to watch. So the big debate is Davis versus Flagg. You got the battle-tested 5th-year senior or the uber-talented freshman, proven college production and All-American accolades, or the projected number 1 draft pick. This is what the debate is going right now. So what is your thought? Who would you take if you're the NBA executive? Are you going with talent and potential, or are you going with a guy who's proven production?
Well, first of all, I think that you have to look at this in terms of they bring different things. In the tournament, I'll take the senior all day long over the phenom freshman.
I agree with that.
In the NBA, it can be a little different. It's nice when there's a lot of tread on the tires still. Their knees are in healthy shape when they're 19 years old. They are still filling out, but they're also young and they are willing to take a lot of coaching. But RJ Davis is excellent in every way. He's a leader. He's talented. He has experience. So you cannot miss if you're an NBA exec on these two guys.
Do you know why I think I would take Cooper Flagg in the NBA? First of all, RJ Davis is 6'2" and Cooper Flagg 6'7". It makes a difference. It makes a difference. But second of all, you're drafting in the NBA for potential, and you're going to develop the guy. And you're really in the NBA, you're trying to, they call it acquiring assets. And that means acquiring really great players. Yeah. And so I think if it's me, I take Cooper Flagg because of the potential. Not that RJ Davis isn't a great player, but I can go get myself a great point guard almost any time. But can I get a guy with this kind of potential who's 6'7", who's kind of a combo guard / small forward, who could play my shooting guard or my small forward position and give me that incredible offensive and defensive production? I think if I'm an NBA exec, I go with Cooper Flagg. And I realize that he'll probably take a year or two to develop.
I think I would have to look at what my system is, what my current team is. Do I have veterans that could really bring Cooper Flagg along? Or is my locker room a little light on leadership? I don't think you're bringing in Cooper Flagg to become a leader in his first 3 years. But you would bring in RJ Davis to be a leader right out of the gate. So
that's a really good point.
I'd have to look at my roster, how it's formulated right now. I would have to, do I have a lot of height and a lot of veterans? If that's the case, I'm probably taking Cooper Flagg. But if I'm, have a little bit of a light locker room on experience and maturity and leadership, I'm taking RJ Davis without even hesitation.
And you're right, because if your roster is constructed in a way that you got, let's say, to the second or third round of the NBA playoffs, but you didn't quite get there, but the only thing you're missing is like a point guard.
Yeah.
Like let's say you're the Phoenix Suns and you have your really old man about to retire at point guard.
Yeah.
And you feel like you're a point guard away, then you're right. You may go get RJ Davis at that point.
Yeah.
But I think most GMs would pick Cooper Flagg, just from the true raw ability and uber talent that he has.
If everything was equal and you feel like you have plenty of height, plenty of leadership, plenty of everything, you're going to take the younger player so you can have him longer and coach him up.
It's true. Interestingly enough, if you look at this little segment here, Davis was not only great last year, but now with Armando Bacot leaving and a couple of other players for Carolina, he's going to get even more shots and more offensive possibilities this year for the Tar Heels. He may have an even better season based on his shooting. And he is one of the preseason National Player of the Year favorites. On the other hand, when Esquire asked LeBron James about the future of United States basketball, he pointed to the Duke freshman Flagg as a big-time player who would keep Team USA's gold medal streak alive. And this 6'9", 17-year-old looked like he deserved a spot on the U.S. team after a spectacular pre-Olympic scrimmage with the team. So, that's the debate here. The young guy with gobs of talent, or the guy who has proven production and is a proven player from day one. You can plug him right into the starting lineup. Any other thoughts on this debate?
No, I think great players. You can't go wrong with either one. I think both bring a little bit different stuff to the table, but both are excellent, talented players that could help a roster in the NBA.
No question. So some of the rules changes that were adopted June 6th of this year. Officials can now review whether a player's foot last touching the court was inbounds on a made shot before time expired. If the player's foot is determined to be out of bounds, officials would put the exact time of the violation on the shot clock. However, if the shot is made and time remains on the game clock, a video review would not occur. So it's a slight change, but essentially giving them more flexibility when there's an inbounds, out of bounds play around a shot made at the end of a shot clock. So it gives the officials a little more flexibility. Then we also have a 1-game suspension now has been added for any ejection of a player who disrespectfully contacts an official or makes a threat of physical intimidation to harm or pushing or shoving an official. So not only has that person now been ejected, but they also get a 1-game suspension. And then the final thing here is this experimental rule they're going to try in the NIT tournament this year to see if it works. That's allowing a coach to appeal out of bounds calls for video replay in the last 2 minutes of games. Any thoughts about any of these three?
I don't think they're going to be pivotal, but I think they sound like they are going to improve slightly the product when you're watching at home, that you'll have a higher likelihood of getting the call right, and you'll have people respecting the refs just a touch more because they don't want to hurt their team with a suspension. So probably good ideas.
That's a really good point. I've always been frustrated in both basketball and football when they say, no, that's unreviewable. No, you can't look at that. And I'm just sitting there thinking to myself, we have such good technology, such good replay now. Every play should be reviewable.
And not just that, but if the TVs in everyone's living room now is so crystal clear that when something's egregious, you have to have the mechanisms in place to fix it on site at the time. You can't have apologies going out. Sorry, we blew the call that cost this team the game. That's unacceptable. If we can see that somebody's toes are on the sideline, then they need to have the same technology we have sitting in our living room at a minimum.
I mean, we should be able to throw a red flag and have them look at whether it was a charge or not a charge in basketball. We should be able to. We've talked a lot this year about how much holding there is in the NFL. and the coach has no ability to throw a red flag to see if that was
Right.
a hold on a big play that cost them the game or something, or a big interference call that was called or not called. I don't understand it. I think that especially in big spots in the last 2 minutes of the game, you should be able to ask for a replay.
Yeah.
At least
I
one.
definitely think that there have to be huge plays in the game that can impact the momentum. Because what not having replay available during certain circumstances can do is it can kill momentum for a team, and momentum's a real thing. You know,
It is.
it's an unquantifiable thing that you can feel. And when a team is rolling, they're getting momentum. Sometimes a bad call can take the wind out of their sails and swing momentum back to the other team on a punt or a kickoff. Or so you want to get the calls right.
You're forgetting it right. I'm forgetting it right. And all sports fans should be about getting it right. And that doesn't mean that a football or basketball coach should have limitless challenges. It should be
Right.
2 per half or maybe 2 per game, where it costs them a timeout if they don't get it. But they should
What
have
makes more sense
some
to me
ability.
is having a ref that's watching what we're watching be able to call to other refs. You might want to take a look at this, and then have the refs on the floor make the call. That's
Right.
kind of what I'm for is I don't want coaches keep slowing the game down and stopping the game
I agree.
because their guys are tired. I want somebody who's watching the toes just in bounds and they called it out of bounds, not making the call necessarily, but to call down to the guys and say, you need to see this replay. I think it should be a team of refs that work together to get it right. Maybe the guy on the floor heard the guy throw an F-bomb at him, and so he got a technical. The guy up in the studio is not going to hear that.
Yep.
But he might see that perfect replay that we're having coming into our living rooms and be able to say, yeah, you want to take a look at this. And then if they disagree and they hold the line for their call, then I can live with that, But not being able to have the guys on the floor review it is sometimes very regrettable.
And then on the last one, not a coach not being able to appeal out of bounds plays in the last 2 minutes of games. Again, it just doesn't make any sense. They're only adding it in now to the NIT, but I have to think this rule will eventually come. I mean, when you're talking the last 2 minutes of games, and if you're talking about like who goes to the Elite Eight or who goes to the Final Four or not, it just seems to me total common sense that a coach can challenge a huge play that is a huge momentum changer.
I agree with that.
Yeah. So, well, the time has come, Robbie. This is the moment of truth. We are going to do our way too early Final Four picks. You guys can all laugh at us in 4 or 5 months when our teams do not come to pass, but we're going to do our best to give you who we think are going to make the Final Four here. It could be somebody not on this list even. So, Robbie, why don't you give me your 4 and maybe tell me who you think is going to be the champ, and I'll do the same.
Well, a lot, of course, depends on the way the brackets fall out. So we're just kind of picking 4 teams that we think might get hot at the end and pull it off. But I'm going to say Alabama. I'm picking 4, right?
Yep. And then you're champion.
Alabama, UConn, Carolina, and Tennessee.
I like that. That's really good. I'm going to say I also have Alabama and UConn as 2 of my 4. I'm going to say Duke, and I'm going to say Texas A&M is going to surprise some people this year. So those are my 4: Duke and Texas A&M. And my champion is going to be Alabama. I think they're going to get it done this year.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Alabama Crimson Tide. Yep. It's my champ. What do you think?
I got a good feeling about Carolina this year. I'm not sure why.
Okay.
I'm looking at their talent, their senior leadership.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're a very talented team that's going to get overlooked a little bit. I just think that they're going to have a good year.
All right, so you got the Tar Heels, and I got Alabama. We'll see what happens when we look at this in a couple months. It'll be fun to watch. This tournament will be all over the country, but of course the Final Four will be there in the Alamo Dome in San Antonio, which I think will be a really exciting venue for this tournament. It'll be really, really fun to watch. Hopefully we'll be in Vegas watching it.
Oh, man. I hope so.
All right, Robbie, well, final thoughts on basketball as we enter this exciting season. I can only hope it's as good as the football's been, which has been fantastic this year.
The realignment for football this year was a total success. I think a lot of what they've done, a lot of the work they've done is to try to emulate the excitement that goes around the 64-team March Madness. And football has to be different because of the nature of injuries and the amount of games you can play in a week. But I'm really excited to see this next generation of senior leaders, freshmen coming in that are phenoms, coaches that are sort of picking up the mantle after some of the old guard have moved on, where they're going to have to use new techniques and new ideas to stay fresh and to keep recruiting their players while they're recruiting new high school players. The talent's getting spread further and further wide instead of just blue blood programs. So that's really exciting. That means that more of the country has a team that's relevant in the final outcome and at least the pursuit of holding the trophy. So if you're not a blue blood in the past, you kind of knew how this was going to go. One of 5 teams was probably able to win the thing. But now there's just so many, it's such a wide field with 64 teams where probably 30 of them have a legitimate shot.
Yep. Or I would say if you look at that top 25 we just looked at, there's probably, 15 teams that could get on a run and do it.
Yeah. Yeah, look at NC State last year. They played above their talent level. They were a very good team, well coached, that caught fire, and that can happen. And that's when you have a real shot. Do you have the ability to go all the way and win the whole thing? Hard to say. They do say that the NCAA tournament is the hardest championship to win because you have to stay hot and be good the whole way through. You have to plow your way through 64-team field.
You think about that run, man. They had to go from the first Tuesday of the ACC tournament, the first game of the 11th seed. They had to win 4 days in a row, win the ACC tournament. They essentially knock somebody out of the NCAA tournament that should have been there, that they took their spot because you have the automatic qualifier rule. And they get in there as a number 11 seed in the NCAA tournament and go all the way to the Final Four. And it was just absolutely magical. That's what people love about basketball. And
it was perfect.
So it's going to be so fun. I can't wait.
And you know what? There's going to be a lot of teams like that this year, too. Several teams that are going to go on that kind of magical run. And to check in on their campuses and watch, them going crazy for their players. And it's going to be so fun.
You remember you had the year Florida Gulf Coast went really deep. You had the year George Mason went to the Final Four.
Yep.
You had the year VCU went to the Final Four.
VCU, yep.
You had all these teams that no one saw coming, and that's what people love about it. Absolutely love it. So I will just put one more plug in. I'm an ACC all the way guy, and I will say that the ACC needs to stop getting shorted by the selection committee and getting only 4 teams in. They really need at least 6 teams in this year. And I'm hoping that 6 teams, earned it in terms of their records.
That would be nice.
That's what I'd like to see. Well, guys, please like the video, subscribe to the channel. Really glad you're on this ride with us. And we've got a lot of great content coming to you Next week, we have the part 2 of our Strange Sports episode, which I know you guys really loved the first one. So look out for that one. We're doing that one a week from today, and that'll be a lot of fun. And otherwise, it can be an exciting college basketball season. We can't wait to watch it with you guys, and hope you guys drop us a comment about who your favorite team is and what you love the most about March Madness.
Thank you so much for joining us on this episode. We had a lot of fun getting excited about this year's tournament and all the path to get there. And I would love to hear what you think is going to happen. Maybe a final matchup or a Final Four, who you think is going to be in there, and go on record, because that's the fun part, is realizing that you missed something or you didn't see a development of something. But thanks a lot, and join us as soon as you can for the next episodes, and we'll see you.
Yep, you guys have a great one. See you next time.